Oh, how many quilts will be at Hartford? We already have a question. Well, we've juried Hartford, so they've all been notified. Do you remember off the top of your head,
Notifications
Michelle?
went out, and I believe we'll have just over 250 quilts with us at Hartford
For contest.
for contest
And then we
quilts,
have close to
yes.
300 special exhibits. So over 500 quilts, so 550. So in my mind, because I used to live up in Connecticut, we had MQX, and we had the Vermont Quilt Festival, and to the best of my knowledge, neither of those ever had that many quilts. So it will probably be the largest quilt exhibit that New England has seen, at least in the time that I had lived there. So I moved there in about 2011. So I'm hoping that everybody comes out to check out all these quilts. They're going to be fabulous. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Michelle Renee Hiatt. I work for American Quilter Society in addition to being a quilt instructor. I oversee education, contest, and vendors, as well as, I should say, for all of our events. So we have quilt shows, quilt retreats, and quilt cruises. So oversee all of that. And I'm here with Michelle Thompson, who I'll let her introduce herself.
Yes, I'm Michelle Thompson, contest coordinator for American Quilter Society. And, I oversee the contests that, help everyone get entered, present everything to the jury committee, and then notifications, all those will be from me. If you ever have any questions, just reach out.
Yeah, perfect. And Michelle and I, along with Betsy Langford, who is a little bit behind the scenes today, and she's, to be perfectly honest, always behind the scenes with Michelle and I in helping with procuring our special exhibits, and together we all get all the quilts ready for publication anytime they're in the show book, anything that goes up on the website, QR codes, hanging tags. And so we're also here with Alan, and Alan's our cameraman. If you come to our show, you typically see him and I together, or Michelle and him together. So he makes us all look good. So it's pretty exciting. So let's jump in. We have a couple questions, and I'm looking them over. I think we can answer these before we start. So quilts appraised for $3K, what type of insurance should I put on it? So I'm not sure if you're talking about shipping insurance or insurance at your household. Because I will tell you, as a person who has previous contest quilts and also quilts that I've done for other things, any quilt that's over $3K that I have appraised, I actually have to submit to my homeowner's insurance, and it's a special rider. And I highly recommend any of you who have high-priced sewing machines, a machine that's worth more than $500, as well as quilts that are worth more than $1,000, you consider getting that rider on your homeowner's insurance. For shipping, you definitely want to add the shipping. Now, depending on how you ship, whether or not you go directly through the post office, UPS, or FedEx, you can always buy additional insurance on that when you ship it. But there are independent, like I know if you go through stamps.com, stamps.com carries their own insurance. So you can ship it via UPS and add their insurance. Their insurance, in my opinion, is usually slightly less. But you do want to make sure you are definitely insuring it.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. How many judges are there, and what are the requirements to be a judge? So we typically have 3 judges at all of our shows. So we rotate them, so we try never to have the same 3 judges during a calendar. We try never to have a judge repeat during a calendar year. We also try not to have the same combination of judges year over year. So we try and split them up. They typically come from our instructor group, and the majority of them are also certified judges. So there's 2 programs that I'm aware of that certify judges, and typically we always have at least one of our judges is certified. For instance, for our Paducah show, all 3 of our judges are certified judges. So there's a lot of money that's issued, or I should say awarded at that show. So All right, so we've answered the questions that have been submitted so far. I'm going to go ahead and share a PowerPoint that we have. We are going to go back and forth. Michelle and I have hands-on examples to show you. So we'll bring up some of the PowerPoint and then we'll go back and forth. So before I get to the Q&A, just to give you a run through what we're going to talk to you about today. Basically, this entire episode is to talk to you about how to prepare your quilt for contest and judging. So we're going to talk about the physical quilt prep, cleaning and pressing, handling and shipping. We have a couple submitted questions. We'll go over important deadlines for you, and then we'll take the questions that have been gathered throughout the webinar. So physical quilt prep. So a lot of what goes into how your quilt looks at a quilt show really is contingent on you squaring up your quilt and also properly putting a sleeve on. It's really a shame when we're hanging the quilts, we so often say, wow, I wish this quilt sleeve had been put on better. It really would have made a difference on how this quilt hangs. So I know it's like the last thing that you have to do, and I'll be 100% honest, I hate putting the quilt sleeve on, but it really does make a difference on how your quilt hangs. So some of the things you want to make sure is that your quilt is square. We'll talk to you a little bit in a little bit about some of the things that you can do to make sure that is square. But you want to securely attach that sleeve to the backing of the quilt. We see that some of you just, when you're stitching it on, you are just grabbing the backing of the quilt. If your quilt is heavily quilted, that will probably work and be secure enough. But for those of you who may have quilting that is not as close, you definitely want to make sure that when you are stitching that sleeve on, you're also grabbing a piece of that batting. That's going to help give it a little more oomph to hang on. Because remember, that sleeve is carrying the weight of your quilt. If you bedazzled it, heavily pieced it, heavily stitched it, that quilt has some major weight. And it's really important that that sleeve is properly attached. And so you want to make sure that in addition to sewing that completely, make sure that you have lined this up completely across your quilt correctly and leveled it. And just don't eyeball it. I use a large acrylic ruler and the truly disappearing fabric markers, which we'll talk a little bit more about. But you want to draw a straight line across the back of your quilt, and that's usually a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch below the binding. And I will talk about when you might want to make that a little lower. You want to, if you're using a lip sleeve, that's when you're going to want to go possibly a little lower depending on how you construct it. And we're going to show you some examples. Let me just go through another slide or so. Also, what's really important when you're pinning your sleeve on to your quilt, you really want to pin from the center and work your way out. So I typically fold my sleeve in half, give it a little finger press, find the center of my actual quilt, and I start pinning from there and work my way out. And kind of smoothing and pinning as you go so it lays really flat. Another thing is to just test the floor before you sew it on. If you lay that quilt on a hard floor and you place your hanging rod inside the sleeve while it's pinned, if the quilt ripples, you know that it's definitely not pinned correctly. And then after stitching, before you put it in the mail to us, you can go ahead and put it on a rod. So Michelle has a great tip in her, she does her Learning Center presentation
at
Thank
each
you.
of
I
the
need
Quilt
another
Week
cup
shows.
of coffee.
I know. It's early.
Yeah.
Yes, my Learning Center presentation, I kind of go over, kind of some tips on photography. And, one of those tips is to get a couple friends and a shower rod curtain, or a shower rod. Go ahead and put that rod through that sleeve and have your friends hold that rod up, and that way you can see it hanging. And it's a great tip to get a good photograph.
As well as to check if your sleeve's properly put on.
Absolutely, yes.
Because if the quilt ripples when you put it on that rod, it's going to ripple when we hang it at the show.
Yes.
So you can go ahead and make some adjustments at that point. You may then realize that even though you thought you were straight, that you kind of went down on one side, and it's easy enough to use your seam ripper and get that straightened out so that your quilt presents the best way it can.
Yes.
In the best possible light, I should say. And so there are some normal, I would call in my opinion, there's three types of sleeves. There's the normal, the split, the lip. So the normal sleeve is basically a 4-inch finished sleeve. It's typically made from a 9-inch strip. You fold it lengthwise and you stitch it on. We do have some links available on our website that can help you to see a demonstration of how Bonnie Browning, who was my predecessor, put a sleeve on a quilt and made the sleeve. So, and we do have measurements as well in that download.
Yes, absolutely. We have step-by-step instructions along with the video that include all of the measurements you need.
Yes. And then there's the split method, and this works great for larger quilts.
Yes.
So you basically put on 2 sleeves that are about 2 to 3 inches apart in the middle. And this allows for separate support brackets or on a hanging rod. It also helps us hang the very large quilts. And so it really also helps distribute the weight more evenly.
Yes, it does.
So those always look great. There's also a sleeve with a lip, and a lot of us were taught to make them. I am a very big D-sleeve maker, and part of that was because I often hung my quilts on an actual pipe. When I would vend at shows, pipe and drape, I would use a very thick rod, and therefore having that lipped sleeve helps it hang better. It doesn't push out against the quilt. Many of you who probably enter your quilts in guild shows and county fairs, they're using that type of rod as well. Now we don't. We're going to talk to you about the system that we use to hang our quilts and show you and talk to you even about the maker behind it. And so therefore, while it's ideal for true thick pipe, we actually use a very thin rod. I would equate it very much to like a curtain rod.
Correct, yes.
With a system. And therefore, you want to make sure that when your lip is flipped up to allow for that pole, that it doesn't go above your quilt. And I'll show you some examples of that. So if you are using a lip sleeve, you want to make sure that when the lip is flipped up, that it can't be seen by the front of your quilt. So what I do is I typically, when I'm thinking about it, because I'm going to show you one that went right and one that went wrong. When I'm thinking about it, I actually put my sleeve about a 1/2 inch lower than I would. So instead of it being a 1/4 inch below my binding, I'm actually putting it 3/4 below my binding. And we'll show you those. All right, so before we show you the examples, we're just going to talk a little bit about our system. Our hanging system, we often get asked this by so many people who come to the show because it really looks invisible. There are these little clips, and you can see them in that upper left photo, that actually the rod goes on. You can kind of see the rod there on the right-hand side, and it actually is like a curtain rod that just kind of clicks on. So we put that curtain rod inside our sleeve, and then through your sleeve, which is important to not make your sleeve thick with thick material, it clips on, and then we just really pull them up, and it's very easy to level. And you can see in this bottom right photo, you can barely see those cords. And it's made by the Hang Ups company, and we put their website there. They have really some great home installations as well. All right, so since we just talked about the hanging rod, let's talk about it.
So it is similar to a curtain rod. It's just Terry likes to call it beefed up a little bit. So it's, your normal curtain rods
strong,
is kind of thin aluminum, and this is actually it's much thicker. So we would slide this in through the sleeve, and so the back of it would be the what's facing out, and then here is our cord that will hang on the rod or the actual pipe that you were speaking about, how some people will make their sleeve for that pipe. So you got to think that's kind of wide. So this will go onto the pipe, and this is the lip right here that she was speaking of. I'm going to try to turn it a couple different ways so you can see it. This will actually hook on right here. So the weight it holds everything right up. And then we adjust it per this little toggle here. So we will start at the bottom and then just you have a person on each side and raise it on up and level it out. It's a great system. It's, just basically makes your quilt look like it's floating there. But you keep in mind that we are going, your sleeve is covering this rod.
Yep.
We attach over the material. So if you do have a thicker material, this is not going to work very well. And that's when you have it where it wants to slide off and drop it. So I have, when I've had quilts in the past come in and that material is super thick, then I am getting busy with either an extra hanging sleeve that I have with me or making adjustments to it. And, we want you to, be able to hang your quilt. We want to be able to hang your quilt where it looks the best. And I've only made those adjustments if absolutely necessary to make sure that we don't want your quilt falling either. So if that material is super thick, we can't use your sleeve. We have to improvise real quick and make some adjustments. So be sure to just use, regular standard cotton material works best. It's actually exactly what you want to be using there. So
Yep.
that is our hanging system.
So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the sleeve now. So this is the D sleeve that I was speaking of. So you can see here, it kind of has a fold. And so when this is actually up, you can see that the sleeve is visible from behind the quilt. So this I did not put far enough down, and therefore it can be seen from above.
And this is what we don't want to do.
Exactly, this is not. But I was, if you're putting a big pipe in it,
Yes.
it won't be seen.
If it's going directly over that, then that comes down and you don't see it at all.
Correct. But it is straight, I'm just saying. All right, so then here's another one. And so this actually did hang at AQS back in the day. So here I have a lip sleeve, right? I made it with the material this time, so it's a little harder to see, but you can still see it has the lip, right? But I did it properly, and it's not visible from the front of the quilt.
And to make that happen, just drop it down, about quarter of
It's
an
a
inch,
half an inch.
half an inch?
Yep,
half
you just
an
put
inch.
it a half
Just
an
drop
inch
it down
below.
a half
So you
inch.
can see here, maybe, if Alan zooms in again, how the top of the lip is sitting further down from the binding. So,
And so when it's hanging, you do not
See
see
it.
anything up here.
correct. And yet it still gives you that little room that the slide is, the pole would not be pushing it out any. So, anyhow, this is my loco, one of my favorites. My first contest quilt. All right. So I think that's it for our examples here. Okay, so we have some questions. So
Okay, so is it okay to attach the top of the sleeve to the quilt so that the binding is attached securely to the quilt when you bind it?
it's acceptable. It tends to not, in my opinion, but everyone is different. It doesn't seem to stay as straight because that sleeve is actually under. Let me see here if I can. So it would be. This sleeve is sitting underneath that binding then, and your binding is being stitched to it. And unless you are absolutely careful, your stitching of your binding onto your sleeve may cause it to be tighter in one place than the other. Mm-hmm. Because remember, the sleeve moves a pretty good amount if you're not careful in pinning it. But so, in my opinion, I have not been as successful with stitching the binding or stitching the sleeve to the quilt and then binding over it. It also causes you a little bit more tension in your binding here because your top binding is going to have more fabric in it than your side binding is. So it could cause you some binding problems as well. All right. So is that it for our questions?
Just to add to that, and you may want to take the sleeve off for some reason. And
This is true.
if you want to take that sleeve off, if you've sewn it into the binding, that makes it more difficult for you to do so. So for whatever reason, if you want to take that sleeve off, if you do use that binding, attaching it inside that binding, that creates a whole nother
Yes.
set of steps that you have to go through to remove that.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to re-sew binding on. I don't know about everyone else, but and I think it's because as a quilter, you got the top done, you got to quilt it. You just at this point you're ready to be done, and now you still have a sleeve, a binding. It's a lot, but we shouldn't complain, right? We're making beauty. All right. So if there's any more questions about sleeves and such, we'll talk about it. We'll take the questions after. We're going to move on to our next section. So if you have marks on your quilt, so this is, unfortunately, we saw so many examples of this last year. It was a shame. You have to make sure that you're removing your chalk, I can speak, and your water-soluble markers. So those blue wash-away pens are a staple for all of us, but you got to make sure that you are preventing them from appearing when the quilt is here to be judged. So a lot of times, some folks, I think, just use very little water to try and remove those lines, and they're not quite gone. And under the real bright lights that we have on our show floor, they could be seen. So you definitely want to check your quilt to make sure that it's under great light, that it's completely out. The other thing that you want to think about is that most of those manufacturers of those markers tell you to soak your quilt, not just spritz it. So that's considered like a total immersion. And if you go ahead and do that in cool water, I would say at least 20 minutes, and allow for the chemicals to dissolve properly, this is a great opportunity to block your quilt, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, as part of your drying process. And the other thing is that you want to first try just plain water. That's what it's meant to be used, and you want to make sure that you're not setting it permanently. So I always try straight water first to see if you can get the markings out. The other thing is test them. Karen K. Buckley, if you follow her at all, she has a great blog post on, she went through all the different markers on the market and what she needed to do to get the markings out. And she went through and scored each of them and gave tips. So Karen K. Buckley, was a long-time quilt instructor for us. She's retired now, but she still enters our contest, beautiful quilts. So definitely check out, she did a whole blog post series. It was probably a year or so ago, but you can, I'm sure, go out to her blog and query it. She has so much information there. It's fabulous. So testing markers first to make sure you're comfortable with what it's going to take to get them out is something you should do. If plain water doesn't work, the baking soda trick really does work. That's a teaspoon of baking soda, a cup of water. It has the proper pH in it that actually will make blue disappear. That works great. That works great for stains as well. The Dawn trick, as a person who has done trunk shows, and as the guild is folding up my quilts, Loco for one had it on it, they put their chin down and fold my quilt, and their makeup ends up on the edge of my quilt. Dawn works absolutely fabulous for that. That's a teaspoon of Dawn in a cup of water, and you kind of swish it with your fingers, and then you kind of create a little mini bath for that section of your quilt, and then let it dry completely flat. So no rubbing, nothing. The Dawn should just really lift it up, and the makeup should be floating on the top of the water that you just want to kind of skim off and then bring it out to dry. Works fabulously. The other thing is that most of those markers tell you never to iron them until you get them removed. So a lot of the markers, if you iron it by mistake or your iron gets close to it, it could accidentally set that water-soluble ink, and you're not going to get it out. The other thing is make sure that whatever you're trying, that you let the quilt dry completely first and see if it's gone when it air dries. A lot of times it looks gone when it's wet, but when it dries, it's not. And then I have to give this caution out because we saw this on a quilt last year. The friction pens are not meant to be used in quilting. I cannot say that enough. They are, while they're popular, they are thermal, and the ink is actually a ghost film that disappears with heat, but will reappear with cold. So many of you might say, well, my quilt's never going to be cold. Well, if your quilt ends up on an airplane,
yes.
in a cargo area, it's cold. Even if it's summer, it's cold. If it ends up
trucks.
a cold delivery truck,
Yes.
it's gonna come back. If you have it if your everyday quilt in a car in the winter and you live in the north, it's gonna get cold. So they are not safe to use on your quilt. Those lines will come back. Maybe you might want to consider using them for the interior of your quilt. You're marking a sew line, a cut line. Definitely do not use them on the front of your quilt. We had a quilt last year that came into one of our contests and all the markings were available. We cannot remove that. It's not fair to the other people for judging. After judging, we contacted the quilter, asked if we could heat it so that during the show it would show without the markings, but during judging, it has to be there because that's how it came to us. Yeah. So anyhow, and then odors. Some of us have pets, or the closet smell. A gentle washing might be good for your quilt to get rid of everything. I would use a color catcher if you're going to wash it, and then also it's another great opportunity for blocking your quilt if your quilt is wet. Lint patrol.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
So we're going to have some samples to show you here. So there is, there's fuzzies that get on quilts. There's pet hair. There's threads.
Yes.
So the burrowing technique is great if you have some bearding to go in the backside of your quilt. Your batting is poking out. A lot of us have seen them. I would call it like a sweater razor.
Yes.
Yeah, you can run that on it. Lint brushes work great. We have a couple that we'll show you that we use for when we're hanging quilts that gets rid of the stray threads. And then you also want to check your shadows. So especially if you have a white background and you've used some dark threads or dark fabric, you might find if you put it in front of a bright window that you actually have shadows in your quilt by a dark thread that's in between your layers. And you can go ahead and use a needle to try and get that ghost thread out. If you line up your needle right in the middle of it, you can typically just get under that thread and pull it out gently, but that works as well. So we'll show you our tools of the trade.
So, just a regular lint brush. These are my little handy dandy ones that fit in my pocket at shows. So if, the Monday and Tuesday before a show, you see these, I'm running around with a bunch of these.
Michelle actually has like a utility belt. She walks around like she's armed. she has everything.
I'm prepared. So I will, I do my best. But if you cover your quilt, if you take a look at it before it gets to us, it's even better. So just going over it with a regular lint brush. And then I also have, you have younger people today. I have no idea what this is, but it's the velvet style. So, you run in one direction and it's going to take that lint off. But, just I can't emphasize it enough. Just going over it and just getting all that little extra lint off before it gets to us, because even though I try, I can't get every piece off of every quilt. And especially if it has a lot of, fuzzies on it, I can't spend, so much time on one and not take a look at others as well. So if you just, and it's awesome to get that pet hair off.
Yes,
don't bring your
hair.
pet to the show on your
Don't
quilt.
bring the pet
Okay.
to your show.
I will just run through and, have to get those dog hairs or cat hairs off.
Yeah.
And,
'Cause it happens.
so it does. We know it's not going to be, we're going to have, a couple slide through while you're packing it up and stuff like that. That's fine. I'm going to try my best to grab those off. But just running through with a lint roller, really,
Helps a lot.
it really helps a lot because you don't want those judges to see all of that.
Yep.
So.
And I can't stress enough, hanging it in front of a lit window will really bring out, especially those ghost threads and such. So
And have a friend come by and take a look at it. Because you've looked at this quilt for so long, you're
don't see it.
you don't see it. You're gonna look over things. So bring a friend over, have them, just, run over it. Oh, hey, there's a spot, and that's gonna help you out.
yes,
So.
big time. Talk a little bit about blocking. Again, I think there's a lot of information available on the internet about blocking your quilt. I would, check a few of them out. I can tell you what I've done for when I've entered the contest, which I no longer can do, but it's all good. I don't really have the time anymore. So blocking is basically, we call it the magic trick in the quilt world. It's basically dampening. I'm going to be perfectly honest. This is when you want to submerge your quilt in a cold bath and get it pretty wet, fully wet. And then you pin it to square it up so that while it dries, it's squared up. All right. And that way there's no waves, no bellies in it. So this is the high level overview of blocking a quilt. But basically you soak your quilt for about 15 to 20 minutes and then you gently squeeze it out. What is best is to do towel rolling. So I lay out a bunch of large towels, put my quilt on top of it, and then start rolling it. And the excess will be rolled into the water will go into the towel. Then I take insulation boards. They come 4 feet by 8 feet. You get 2 of them, you lay them down on a floor next to each other, and you lay your quilt out on it. And then you start from the center, you pin the exact center of your quilt and work your way out. I just use like a large quilter square. I have a 16-inch, a 20-inch. You can also use, what are the guys use for building? The T-square.
T-square.
You can use a T-square, but basically you want to work your way out from the center, pinning it just so that, each block, if it's a 12-inch finished block, that block is square and is 12 inches, and then you just keep working your way out. When you get it all pinned, then you can take a measuring tape and actually measure from the top left to the bottom right and the top right to the bottom left. If those two are the same measurements, along with the outside of your quilt, then your quilt is squared. So if you have a rectangle quilt, that diagonal trick will still work to make sure that it is square. And then I cannot stress this enough. You really have to let that quilt dry completely. And I will tell you, it can take days, depending on, if it's in the winter inside and you have heat running, it could go faster, but it really will take you some time depending on how large your quilt is. You can also try pressing and steaming. So note that pressing is different than ironing. Ironing insinuates you could stretch it. So you just really want to press it gently. And then there's steaming versus drying it. So you can use the steam sparingly. It'll dry quicker. And it also helps remove some stubborn wrinkles. We'll show you. We actually steam we steam them before judging to the best of our ability, as long as they are not silk embellished with a glue or paint.
Correct.
And so those there. But you really, again, never want to fold a quilt that's damp from steaming or washing it or blocking it. It will wrinkle more than when you start it if you fold that while it's wet.
So
yeah.
we will steam at shows, we will steam a quilt, but not all quilts. If that quilt has embellishments on it, paint, certain types of materials, I'm not going to get a steamer near your quilt, just because it could affect it in other ways. I've also had people, entrants that will put a note in their quilt box that says, "Do not steam my quilt," and we appreciate that because you're letting us know how to handle that. There is a section if your quilt's been accepted into the show and you are sent your quilt return preferences, there's a section in those questions that say, do you have any special shipping or shipping and handling instructions or instructions for your quilt? And that's where you would want to enter that information. There is, do not steam my quilt if you prefer it not to be steamed. Now, if it comes in and, it's not made of any questionable materials that steaming can affect, and it's hanging at the show and it's got a crease, then we're going to try to get that crease out before the judges do see it. So keep that in mind, that we do our best to make sure that your quilt is presented the best way possible.
Yep.
So.
So we have a question on the blocking. So do you cover the installation boards with anything before using them for blocking? I do not, because you have a wet quilt you're sitting on there, and that wet quilt will wet whatever under it, and it will take even longer to dry. So I do not. You may find on the internet some others that do, but I don't. What if you're afraid of the fabric bleeding when blocking the quilt? So if you put, when you submerge it for those 20 minutes, if you put Dawn in your water bath, and I'd put a good amount. If you're going to soak the entire quilt, I'd put about a 1/4 cup of Dawn. And you'd want to draw the water first, put the quilt in it, and then put the Dawn on top, and then kind of like swish it to kind of activate it, and then let it sit. And then after about 20 minutes, sometimes people do it overnight, the dyes will float to the top, and then you're going to want to skim it before you lift that quilt out. So you're going to skim all the dye off the top of that bath, and then bring the quilt out. And that should prevent it from bleeding. Do you know if you can remove friction pens somehow after use? No, they're all myths. So I've heard people say, oh, if you iron it, it gets it completely out. Oh, if you use Best Press, it gets it completely out. No, it comes back. That's the whole nature of the pen. That's what it's designed for. In fact, if you purchase that pen from an office supply store, it will say right on the package, not intended for fabric, because they've gotten so many complaints. However, when you see it in a quilt shop, it's out of its packaging. It is not meant for quilting, especially the front of your quilt. Please do not use it on the front of your quilt. All right, our next question. Also, will judges mention in the comments if they notice marks on your quilt? So, at our contest.
Yes.
So, do you want to?
Paducah is the only show that we offer judges comments. Okay. And I have seen it throughout the years that, yes, they're going to let you know. That's going to be part of their comments is, noticeable markings. But unfortunately, at all of our other show locations, we just don't have the time to be able to gather those comments from the judges.
But they will comment on it.
Yeah.
In person. Yes. So we've heard them.
I've heard
it's
these
a shame
comments.
she didn't take time to remove those markings.
And that's where I come up with some of these hints and tips and tricks for you, is because I've heard them mention it. Not only have I attempted to, remove the hair, the fuzzies, the extra strings and stuff, that I hear those comments. So that's what I'm kind of bringing that feedback to you. Hopefully within, future, webinars, we're able to inform you of more. So I am going to start making note of these things so that way I can bring it to you and address it. So, but unfortunately, we can't offer comments at every show, but I have known for Paducah comments to go home to the quilter saying, you needed to remove that markings. So.
Yep. I saw a question about sorry, Alan's typing in our additional questions. So some questions about how do you skim it off, the dye off. So I just use my kitchen ladle. I'm sure there's other things out there. You could use probably like a dustpan, clean dustpan. But basically it's almost like when you're cooking and you're trying to skim something off the top. You would want to use the same mechanisms. Does it take forever? Yes, but it's worth it. So, what kind of pins do you use for blocking on an installation board? So I use the T-pins. They're really strong. They can go in straight, and I can see the top that it's in straight and it's easy for me to find them to get them out. So that's what I use. Again, I think you have to do a little trial and error and see what works for you. I did see somebody about the soaking bath, about a catcher, a shout, yeah. Can you use shout color catchers to get the dyes out when soaking the quilt? You could try it. I never have. I will tell you that's what I do when I actually, for my utility quilts, when I wash them, I always put color catchers in. I've never tried it in a bath, so I can't answer to that. I would say try soaking a block, first, and seeing if that works for you or not. So do we have any more about the soaking, Alan, in your questions here? Any tips for removing?
Any suggestions for wool on flannel that cannot be soaked?
So wool on flannel, no, I guess really I would go to the steaming method, I think, at that point, versus the soaking. I do soak wool batting. That's all I use in my quilts is wool batting. So I've never had any trouble soaking wool batting, but I've never tried to soak a flannel quilt. Any tricks on removing chalk from quilt tops and thin pencil lines? So for chalk, what I found works really good. I'm looking around our studio and I don't have one. What works for me and works great for removing chalk lines is it's called the thread catcher. And that's actually good for removing stray threads and such. It's the little mitt. You see them always at the quilt shop checkouts. It's called the thread catcher. And it has on the back, it's basically that material that's used in the filters for fish tanks. So you can actually use that too, cut up filters for fish tanks. And you can kind of rub it on the quilt and it does break up the chalk lines very well. I will tell you the secret for chalk lines is also not to get them wet until they're out. So similar to the water solubles, don't iron them. For chalk lines, don't get them hit with steam or anything wet until you get them out. But that works really, really well. So judging, we're back to some judging. So do judges judge the quilts hanging or are they on a long table? So we really don't talk about our judging process. I will say that both are done for our Paducah, and in our satellite shows, they are hanging for judging. So our satellite shows, our non-Paducah show, I should say, we call them satellites, because we're not here. Those are done, in a much shorter time frame. Our Paducah judging takes days.
Yes.
Days. First of all, we have almost always double the quilts, so it takes a lot. And can anyone observe the judging process? Nope, not unless you're the two of us. So nope, it's private. We actually coordinate it off when we're judging, and we don't let anyone through while the judging is taking place. So it's the judges and us.
Yes.
For the satellite, there's a few more employees who are part of it for the Paducah show.
Now, it is a blind judging. That's why we have you cover your quilt tags, so the judges do not know your names. If they have questions about techniques you may have used or, methods, quilting methods and anything of that type, I will inform them of that. But I do not inform them of who the quilt belongs to. I only answer technical questions about the construction and quilting of your piece. And so they're looking at it, in the most non-biased way we can possibly make that happen.
Yep.
So.
Yep, and that's one of the things, and I thought it was in the slide deck, but we haven't come across it yet, so cover your labels. And if you, by any chance, have put your name on the front of your quilt, you're going to want to cover that with painter's tape. So
Yes.
we cannot, if the judging is blind, we cannot have your name showing anywhere on the quilt.
So I've gone into a set of judging where a quilt was accepted and they had their name, either quilted onto the front or kind of like their signature, which is fine. But you have to also keep in mind that those judges are going to be looking at the front of your quilt with a big piece of blue tape, painter's tape across the front. We use painter's tape because it does.
It doesn't leave any adhesive
it doesn't
behind.
leave any residue, and it's the safest to place on your quilt. But visually, they're looking at your quilt with a big piece of tape on the front. So it's, that's a decision you need to make on if you're presenting it in that manner. Do you want them to see the tape, or do you want to put your signature on the back?
Yeah.
So I can,
Or just wait,
I will also cover it if it's on the back, but it's not the first thing that they look at when they walk out to see your quilt. So, just keep that in mind.
Yep. And then I think it's what do you use to cover your label? So back in the day when I was entering contests, I would make basically off the same material as my sleeve. I would just make a square the same size as my label, and I'd safety pin it over to cover the label. That way it can be unsafety pinned to look at if someone needs to identify whose quilt it is for the non-judging purposes. In other words, making sure it's going home to the right place.
Making sure it's placed in the correct area of the show lineup, making sure it's going home to the right person. I do like to be able to confirm, certain things. And if you've stitched that cover all over it, that makes it a little bit more difficult to do. That's why I do suggest either you can use what I call a flap, where if you want to stitch it on, leave only the quilt title exposed, and then just kind of attach it, the flap right there underneath that quilt title, and it flaps over everything, and maybe use one small pin to attach it at the bottom. Or you can just pin the four corners and no stitching, just pin that cover over all of the rest of the information. I get a lot of people ask, why we request for like your name and address on that quilt label. And I always say it's security purposes. It's for your benefit. If you're shipping your quilt to us, and then you get a phone call from me, I haven't got your quilt yet, and you're like, well, I mailed it. This has happened, not often, but it has. And the quilter, when she sent it to us, it didn't make it to us, but it did make it back home to her. She received that quilt at a later date because someone, accidentally had it delivered to them, and they saw that label where it had her name and her address on it, and the person mailed it back to her. So she was able to get her quilt recovered and sent back home because she had her name and address on it.
Yep.
So it's not something that you would think to write on your quilt label, but it can be very beneficial, especially if you plan on shipping your quilt.
Yep, I've had it happen to me. I had a quilt that I was shipping to a fabric manufacturer for their catalog, and during the shipping process, the box got torn apart, and the quilt ended up out of the box. And because I had enough information on my label, the quilt was able to be returned to me. So it's definitely, it's for your own safety.
It's worth it, so.
Yep. There is a question, and by the way, if you've joined us after we've talked about it, I've seen a couple of you raise your hand. You really want to go down to the Q&A section and type in your question. We can't get you to you and with you raising your hand. It's best if you type your question. So someone asked, why don't you mention who the judges are for the show? We absolutely do.
Yeah.
We do not announce them in advance of the show, but we put them on in our show guide.
They're in the show book.
So you know exactly who the judges are. We typically, announce them if we're doing any functions at the show. So we are very proud of our judges. So they are known after they've judged. So
Correct.
we don't announce them in advance of the judging. So would it be possible to steam iron on the back of the top that is silked? If we were going to steam a silk quilt, that's how we would do it, but we would only do that with the permission of the quilt maker.
Yes.
Because it's
And
made of silk.
I have been there and done that.
Yeah.
Yes, and we received,
Oh, Well, you don't want to steam silk.
So, I mean, it's, but I was, I received permission to do it before. It was, in with that handling instructions. It's okay to steam this quilt if it's on the back of it. So, it's one of those things, if you give us permission, we, and list that in instructions, that will be, it will be handled in that way, so.
So someone asked, can you do a permanent label in one lower corner and a show label with an address on the opposite corner? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Both of them
Yes.
need to be covered.
Yes, yes, as long as the information, the only thing we want to be able to see that is not covered is the quilt title. But you're absolutely welcome to put those extra labels and, separate them out. You don't have to keep that label on forever, but it is very helpful to have that information on there, and you can definitely do multiple labels.
Yep. So someone asked about a sleeve with a facing. You would just want to put it below the facing. So where the facing is stitched to the back, your sleeve is going to go right beneath that. Again, I would leave yourself 1/4 of an inch to allow for proper stitching of that sleeve. And then what thickness is the insulation board? I use a 1-inch thick board. I used to have 2 inches because I would put them on the floor and kneel and crawl. And so the 2 inches gave a buffer. Now I'm too old to do that. So I put them on tables. And so the 1 inch works perfect. I wouldn't go less than an inch because you want it to be sturdy enough that when you're putting that pin into that insulation board, it is keeping it from moving. So I feel a 1/2 inch is not thick. It's not going to enable you to put that pin thick enough, deep enough to hold it securely. Are quilts designed by AI acceptable or discouraged? So this is funny. We were just talking about this in jurying the other day.
Yes.
So at this point, there's no rules.
There's no, well, so put it this way. When we ask for your design source, you will source it that it was, AI was used. And so.
Grant permissions.
Yes, I mean, so if we understand it's coming, it's going to be, used more frequently. But even if AI, created you a design, if it's using someone else's design incorporated in that, you're going to be requested to provide that information.
Correct.
So, I mean, we think it's extremely important to give the credit to those that came before you with that design. So, we want to make sure everyone is recognized. But if you create a design, you're just going to list it that it was AI created.
And what AI tool you used.
Yes.
And you would want to make sure that that tool allows for you to use the output of theirs for monetary gain.
Correct.
Because technically you're entering a quilt contest that you could win money.
Yes.
So some AI tools specifically say cannot be used for monetary gain. And so if that AI tool says that, you would not be able to use that.
Correct.
Yes. Should we put a tracking device on the quilt? So this cracks me up, especially Paducah, which when we put back on our PowerPoint, you're going to see the hallway, part of the hallway last year with all the quilts that go to Paducah. We think it's actually funny when we start moving them because we're like, oh, we're making someone's day now.
Yes.
Because they all start
They start beeping.
They start chirping at us. And so yes, they
Yes.
are in there. I would just say that you'd want to make sure that it doesn't cause your quilt to bulge out. That
So I've seen them placed in a couple areas. One, I suggest don't put it in with your sleeve.
Nope.
When you put it in with your sleeve and we're running that rod through that sleeve, it's going to catch. So it could, if it's anything in there that's going to catch on that rod, it can either damage the tracker or it's going to maybe loosen some stitches and it fall out. So the majority of them I see are in your, or in the label. Most people will put it at the label and just kind of stitch it in. Also where that, it allows it to, not bulge that
Yep.
quilt out. It's on the back side of it. So you are welcome to track your quilt. I think it's great. You were able to watch it through the shipping process.
Us moving it?
Yes, anytime we're moving it through, the facilities where we're at, when we're on our way to the show. But it's the best way to track your quilt. Shipping companies, you can, you can pay for insurance, you can do this, you can do that. But if you want the peace of mind, track it,
Track it, yep.
That way you know exactly where it's at. And, if they're not updating your tracking information, and you're contacting them and they're saying, it hasn't been delivered, we don't know where it's at, you can tell them where it's at.
Yep.
So, that's even better. But it gives you peace of mind. So,
What tracking device would you use? I would research them. They all
Yeah.
have different, some of them you have to subscribe to, some of them come free with your phone. That I would definitely say you would want to research independently. I by no means am the expert on which devices. This is a great question, made my day. What satellite shows now have miniature categories? Would they need sleeves for that particular show? And it is Columbus. So we have
Yes.
miniatures at Paducah, as well as Columbus, and miniatures do not need sleeves.
correct. You
They
do-
go in cases.
Yes,
Yeah,
you-
we're not hanging them.
No. We have special cases. If you've ever been to the Paducah show, you've seen those cases.
Or if you come to the satellite and you saw last year the two of us
Correct.
exhibit,
Yes.
we had cases there. Yes.
For those miniatures. And so a sleeve is not required on a miniature.
Yep. And so the question is are computerized quilting and free motion quilting judged in the same category? Here, for AQS, we have the quilts go in the categories based on what type of
Quilting method.
was done. So if it was hand quilted, it is in categories of its own. We do have some categories that include multiple,
Yes.
but our main categories. Then it's if your quilt was quilt on a movable machine, meaning the quilt machine was on rails and you moved the
Head of the
head
machine.
of the machine. And then we have if it was quilt on a stationary, which means a domestic, or there are some
The head of the machine stays
is in the
stationary.
table and you move the fabric. So that's what decides the category. So yes, technically a computerized quilted on a computerized machine would be in the same category as a person who moved the machine. And so, but I will tell you for the most part, they're very easy to see, to determine that it was computerized.
Also, those techniques are listed within your entry, and
the judges would know.
the judges are, when I review the techniques used for that quilt, the judges are informed of that. So they know it was either computer assisted or they know it was free motion.
Yep. Should your quilt be accepted for judging, are there directions that will be sent as to exactly what will be required on the label? Yes.
Whenever I send out notifications for an accepted quilt, you will get a very long email that gives you all these pinpoints.
Read it.
It gives you information on, exactly when to ship it, how to ship it, and how to package it. The sleeve instructions are also in there, how to cover your label. All of that is presented within that email.
So that's a great segue back to our PowerPoint, our last
Yes.
section on shipping and handling. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that back up, and then we'll also have some exhibits, some samples for you to show you. So shipping and handling. So this picture here shows you half the hallway in the Paducah Convention Center. I took this last year while we were getting ready. So this kind of shows you how they come in, and we're going to talk about how they're boxed into our boxes and labeled with your number, and then they are stacked on pallets of like-sized boxes, and that's how they're transported from our facility to shows, and how we go about receiving them at our quilt show before we hang them. So it's pretty neat. I think it's neat. All right, so folding. So there's a couple different ways you can fold it. We'll go through these. Again, we're going to show you some examples. There's the basic right side out fold, which is folding it similar to a bed sheet, but ensuring the right side is out. So in other words, the piece side, the side that is meant to be the front, is out. That helps create the harder folds are going to be on the back of the quilt.
Yes, that crease will show up on the back of your quilt, not the front of your quilt. I know it's important to a lot of people. They're thinking, oh, I need everything to be on the inside of it, but you're actually creating more of a crease on the front of that quilt by folding it the right
Right
side
side.
on the inside. And it makes a difference. It really does. So
Yeah,
keep that in
big
mind.
difference. Another thing that really helps is those of you who crumple up acid-free tissue paper and put it where the folds are going to kind of give it a little bit of a buffer. That works great as well. That comes out really well. And when we open that box, we mark that tissue paper goes back in the folds.
Yes.
So that when we rebox your quilt, we're going to box it the same way that you did. Then there's the snake method, which sounds a little funky. Michelle's going to demonstrate it for us. So that's when you fold your quilt. You kind of you kind of
Do
roll
like a loose roll to
Yes,
it,
yeah.
and then you just
either put it like an S,
S.
or an O, depending on the size of your quilt. I think that's easier for us to demonstrate
Yes,
than
I'm
to
gonna
speak about.
demonstrate it
But this creates this works really well without the tube charge.
Yes.
So it actually rolls your quilt without that. So we'll go through that. And then tubing. So we get a lot of questions about tubes. So many professionals believe this is the only way to send their quilt. They roll it on a tube, and it then has to go in a tube of its size. Now I will tell you, it's either one way or the other. Well, actually, I guess there's three. It's like the bear in the chair, or is it the bear in the chair who sits in the chair? I don't know. It's too early for me to remember that. 3 bears, Cinderella and the 3 bears, right?
no Goldilocks and three bears.
Goldilocks and the 3 bears. See? Oh my goodness. Anyhow, so
Michelle
we
needs
either
more
get.
coffee.
I definitely need more coffee. We get a third where the tube is too big for the tube. The tube box is too big for the tube, so the tube can move around. We get tubes that once the quilt is rolled barely fit back in the tube box. So you really want to make sure that you find the right size box to put your rolled tube in. And you can cut that box down. So I
Yes,
think
you can make
think about-
adjustments to the box, and I've received many irregular shaped boxes that sometimes you just gotta make adjustments yourself to make sure that it fits it correctly.
Yeah.
So
But we always joke here when we get them. We're like, well, they paid for a lot of air to be shipped because you're
Yes.
paying on the size of that box. So you really want to make sure that the quilt does best if it can't move around. So you
and
really
this also applies to boxes. That you don't want to, the shipping companies are gonna measure that box. If you're, stuffing it with, or not stuffing it, sometimes we do have boxes sent to us and that quilt's just shifting around in there. You were paying to ship air. So keep in mind to cut that box down, and then that way, one, it will save you money there, but also, if your quilt's just shifting around in there, stuff it with some extra bubble wrap or acid-free paper. Your quilt is in a plastic bag at this point, so just fill it in there. Just make sure it's not shifting, because what happens is they're going to put a heavier box on top of that box, and then it's going to squish it.
Yep.
So that could actually create more damage to your box or your quilt than just, either making sure you have the appropriate size or filling it with extra,
paper.
extra paper
Yep.
or bubble wrap or something. So
And so for using a tube, I do highly recommend that you do use a pool I can talk. Pool needle.
Noodle. You really can't talk this
I really
morning.
cannot talk this morning.
A pull noodle.
Pool noodle is best.
Oh, wait, we'll have
And
that in a minute.
Yes, and we're going to show an example of it. But also what works really great and helps you roll that onto that noodle is if you sew on a leader. So basically, if you encase the noodle in muslin and leave basically a little bit extra, that kind of
Like
acts as
6 to
a
8
leader.
inches.
Yeah, 6 to 8 inches works best for us to roll, and yourself to roll that quilt on. So you can lay it on top of that leader, and it really helps you start, especially if you've done some binding treatments. We love for you to have a leader on your pool needle because it helps us be able to make sure that everything that you've added onto that binding is nice and flat before we start rolling. But it
Yes.
helps us keep it straight so that you don't get that spiral effect. The other thing is that you can cut your noodle down to the size of the quilt. That's really important as well. Also, consider if your quilt is wider than a noodle, getting a second noodle, and you can usually just put a little PVC pipe in the middle of those two noodles and put them together. We do that all the time for our special exhibits. Now, there is an additional cost to sending your quilt to us on a tube, and we just want to justify it. We get some questions on it. Why does it cost me more? Well, the time to handle, store, transport your quilt in a tube is much more significant for us. It takes up additional space, it's additional resources. For instance, most of the time, the quilts that come to us on tubes, by the time we get them rolled, ending a show, they've taken down all the other quilts, which are probably 7 times as many quilts. So
Yes.
it takes us a lot longer to handle your quilt on a tube. If you think your quilt is going to be best shown coming to us on a tube, it's probably worth it to you, but there is an additional charge, not just for shipping typically, but also for us handling it. We also have to, if you ship your quilt to us in a tube, we have to ship your show tags, your show book, and any ribbons back to you separately. So it's additional postage back.
Yes. But that is included in that
Tube fee.
That tube fee. So you don't have any additional charges coming at you at a later date. But that tube fee, that covers all of those items for you.
Yep. So someone had asked a question while I'm bringing this down. Would you let a shipping company do the boxing? If you think they're familiar with quilts, you could. That is totally your preference. I personally would handle my quilt myself, but I'm a
You
little
know your quilt
particular.
the best. You know your quilt the best. And
We also have online videos too
yes.
on our YouTube channel.
Yes.
That also helps it. So I'll ask one more question before we show you some examples. I'm assuming it's, can I insert a curtain rod into a pool needle to stiffen it up for rolling larger quilts? You can. I think you'd have to play around with the width of that. It might be a little additional weight. PVC works great.
yes, PVC is going to be lighter than that curtain rod inside there. So if you think about it, that you're thinking of weight when you're shipping, the PVC would be less expensive to put inside there.
Right.
So
And you basically just need the PVC. Pool needles differ, so I will say that. You'd want to inspect the pool needle that you have, pool noodle that you have. So this one's probably like a 3/4 inch. So you'd want to buy PVC that's about that size. And then I want to show you here. So see, you can, it's kind of it's a rough edge, but basically a bread knife you can use to cut this, or we just got past turkey season. You can use an electric knife as well if you want, but really a bread knife works great to cut it down to size. And that way you find a box that fits, this noodle is the same size as your quilt. You find a box that's the same size as this noodle, and you are shipping it really well.
yes.
So Michelle, do we want to show some of the folds?
Okay,
By the
so
way, I did
I have-
see someone say that snake can be used for fan folding as well. Yes, it can, but I would ask you to think about fan folding. So fan folding means, like every 4 to 5 inches you are folding that back and forth like a zigzag. That's going to get a lot of folds in your quilt. So shipping your quilt is like packing. The less folds, the better. So I would be a little worried about the fan. Yep.
Okay, so this is our standard. This is actually one of our small standard boxes. When your quilt arrives, we're going to take it out of your box and we're going to place it in one of our 3 standard sizes. We do this, like you saw with that that image of the Paducah quilts all stacked on top of each other. If you could imagine us trying to do that with your multiple different size boxes, it's just, no, it's not practical. So we're going to take it out of your box and we're going to put it in one of ours. Another thing about this is it's double flapped, okay? So when it's protecting your quilt better. So
The best part is, as well, is we ship them home in these.
yes,
And-
your quilt's going to come back to you in this style box.
Keep
And
them.
yes, keep it, ship it. I mean, if you have, if you're entering multiple years, you know, you have that box to use again. So,
Or just if you want to use it to send the quilt to
so I'm
somewhere
going to
else.
move this chair out of the way just a little bit so I can show you. So this is what you don't want to do. Do you see? The quilt is all, I mean, so you were basically paying for a lot of air here, okay? So when you're sending it to us, you want to make sure that you are, you know, you can make it a smaller box. That is fine. I did pick out the smallest quilt I could because
We wanted it on camera.
we wanted it on camera and to be able to show it. When you're sending your quilt to us, wrap it in a plastic bag. I can't emphasize that enough. You do not want to just put your quilt down in the box. You want it wrapped. If your shipping box gets stuck out in the rain, or even if it's raining as that delivery guy is bringing it in, you don't want anything soaking your quilt. So make sure it is wrapped in plastic. I do suggest not using black plastic trash bags.
Never put a quilt in a trash bag.
Okay.
You can on Amazon, you can buy clear trash bags, right? For barely nothing. You're a quilter, you're going to use them. Buy the box.
But those black trash bags, sometimes I've had them leave marks on things, the oils on them that, you know, it just may, you know, be, just they leave behind residue. Also, if you're shipping your quilts in hot summer months, you don't want any of that bleeding off onto your quilts. So avoid black trash bags and either, you know, preferably stick to the clear trash bags if you can. So just for a standard fold, I went ahead and put this all together, but we're going to, here's your extra, you know, tissue paper. You want tissue paper in the folds. It's going to help keep those creases out. And so if you have your quilt like this, again, you want to fold top to bottom, so that way that crease again is on the ends or on the back of the quilt, and it's not going to show on the front of your quilt. But if you take a piece of tissue paper and put it inside there,
So it's sitting right here.
so, and you know, if you need to twist it a little bit, give it a little floop right in there, okay? And then you're going to then take it and do another regular fold. And then if wherever you're folding, put that tissue paper. So again, folding. And then I like to flip it over from this part right here. You can, at this point, you can do a center fold and fold it there, and then grab you some extra tissue paper and fold it again. Or from this point, you
could
can
go
do
to
it.
third,
You
too.
can do thirds.
And that way it might fit in your box better.
Yes. Okay.
Really easy.
Yes, absolutely. So that's your standard fold. And then when it comes to, again, making sure you put it in that plastic bag before it is shipped out. The next thing that we're going to look at real quick is rolling it. So when you're rolling your quilt, this has got a pull noodle in here already. Okay, so if you can imagine us actually being on a flat surface, we don't have a whole lot of room. So your sleeve is up here at the top. So you're starting
Yes, the
at
last thing
yes.
that gets rolled is their sleeve.
So you're starting at the bottom, and you're going to simply roll that around or over that. Okay. And then you want to take a few extra pieces of string and tie. I always say
Ripped muslin works great too.
yes. I always suggest 3. We usually just have a bunch of these laying around the show as our extra pieces. Any kind of pieces of scrap fabric, and then we're going to make them into strings for rolling quilts. I always suggest 3, 1 on each of the ends, and then 1 in the center. And then for snaking it, this is always fun. So you want to start off with, either you can use, you don't have to use this, but I think it helps me get started on it better, is just getting a little bit of tissue. But we're going to do a loose roll here. So we're just doing a loose roll.
Keeping it even.
Now this is a very fast version of this.
Yes.
Okay, so once you get it in that loose roll, you can either, again, tie it, but you can either do the O shape. Well, that just wanted to unfold on me. You can do the O shape like that, and put it in your in the bag, like put it in the plastic bag and then lay it in the box. It's going to take up, around the edge of the box there. Okay. You can also, again, the snake or the S.
Works really well too. Again, in a plastic bag.
In a plastic bag,
But just so
like
you can
that.
see.
So that way you have less creases in there. Okay. And so that's just some examples. I have quilters reach out all the time. Everybody's always coming up with new ideas and like, oh, I did this and I did this. I see quilts come to us in all different types of folds, but you just want to keep in mind of what is creating those creases on your quilt. And when it comes to folding a quilt, some people are like, but I have this on my quilt, this on my quilt. And when I'm working with, sometimes volunteers, and I'm like, what does the quilt feel like it's going to fold at? Where's it telling you to fold it?
Yes.
You don't always have to fold it where you think you should, but if you have certain certain designs and certain patterns that allow you to fold on this side and not so much it gets stiffer, and don't fold in the stiff spot.
Yep.
Okay, you want to work around your designs. So just keep that in mind as well.
Something else that works great, if you have embellishments on the top of your quilt and you're going to roll it, batting works great. We
Yes.
see that, or sometimes even flannel. But if you, on your tube, if you sew on instead of just that 6 to 8 inches, you go ahead, leader, you go ahead and put it the length of your quilt, then we can actually lay your quilt on it, and the embellishments has the batting cushion between layers.
Yes.
Now, there's going to make your quilt bigger. It's going to occupy more space and more weight when you ship it to us. But that
it's
works
protecting your
really
qu-
well.
It's
really
protecting
well.
your quilt. So, as you can see, when you go to a show, you're going to see a variety of quilts, all types of techniques used. And some of these you just need to, like I said, the quilt's going to kind of, depending on the design, it's going to show you how it wants to be folded.
Yep.
And-
So we'll take some final questions,
All
and
right.
then we're just going to share some deadlines for you, for those of you who are entering, or we hope you'll considering entering. We see so many great quilts out there. We're like, why don't they enter our contest? So please, our quilts judged 1 or more judges. All the quilts are judged by 3 judges.
Yes.
At every one of our shows. Do you make a note on how the quilt is boxed for returning? Yes. So as those quilts are unboxed, we write notes on the flap of the boxes. And so that way, if there's a different person who's boxing your quilt then unboxed it, the instructions are there, and we all know to to look for them. So it's kind of like a prize. You open the box, you're like, oh, how did they do this? Oh, that's interesting. They did it this way. And so we go ahead and put it back the same way. And then what are your standard sizes for boxes? And Alan, I'm assuming, is this the true
Actually,
answer?
Terry.
Look at that, Terry. Alan always working behind the scenes. So our standard boxes sizes are 16 by 16 by 5, 20 by 20 by 6, and 24 by 24 by 7. So those are the sizes we use.
And that's your small, medium, large boxes that we use. We also have an oversized box that's 26 by 26. If your quilt is so large that it only fits in that 26 by 26, it also includes an additional handling fee, like it was in a like if it was rolled or such. But we only do that if we have to. But we do have that if it's necessary.
Yeah, because that's what the charges. So for those of you who are shipping quilts, once you get beyond a 24 by 24 box, the shipping costs increase dramatically. So just keep that in mind when you are purchasing boxes. If you are dropping off the quilt and picking it up, are the same boxes requirements recommended?
Yes. So if you are dropping your quilt off here at the office, which anyone's welcome to do, just email me and I'll give you the instructions on how to do so on dropping it off or picking it up. And we do ask that you present it to us in that same boxed requirement. As long as you still need to put it in a bag. You still need to put your shipping slip or your packing slip inside there, and you still need to include it in a box.
Yep.
So.
Did you ladies color coordinate today? Yes, we did. We realized that we both, for our last quarterly, which we try and do these every 3 months, our last quarterly we were wearing blue, so we're like, well, it's Christmas, let's try and wear red, and neither one of us really wear red, so we were like, well, we're going to wear plum. So that's what we went with. So I'm just going to share one more time. I have a couple deadlines we'll put up on the screen, and we'll wrap it up. We've greatly enjoyed you all joining us today. So, we have submitted questions that I totally forgot about.
Oh, yes.
So let's ask those first. So please explain the different types of bindings for quilts. Is one specific binding better than the others? No, they're not. It all depends on what you want to do. So you can see here we have
Based on the design of your quilt.
Yep, we have a flanged binding up in the upper left. The second one on the left has a bias binding. The bottom one was a whatchamacallit? We just talked about it with putting a sleeve on. Facing, thank you. Facing binding, you can see up on the upper right, that has a very embellished binding, scalloped. And then we have a cutout, which is also, I wonder, they definitely weren't in the rush for getting their quilt done, right? And then,
pretty.
of course, we have the curved, the binding. So there's so many out there. It's really what you think will look best on your quilt and also what you feel you can execute the best. And then we had one more submitted question ahead of time. I am quilting using big stitch hand quilting. I am concerned about the look of the big stitch on the back of the quilt. Can you please tell me what the back should look like when using hand quilting method? They should be equal. So the front and the back should really have equal stitching for your big stitches. All right, last but not least, just a recap of our shows that are coming up. So we start off our year, we're already in the Daytona Beach mindset. So we have our February show. Then we are going for the first time ever to Hartford, Connecticut. Our New England show is April 11th.
8th through the 11th.
I'm sorry, what did I say?
8th through the 11th.
8th through the 11th.
You started with the 11th. I was like, oh no.
That's the end date.
Yeah.
Then we are very quickly back here in Paducah, Kentucky for our largest show of the year, which is April 22nd to 25th. And then we are back in Grand Rapids. We love Grand Rapids.
Yes.
We're there August 19th to the 22nd. And then again, another show, brand new show locations this year. We are in Columbus, Ohio on September 23rd to 26th. All the first 3 shows, the deadline is in the past. So you can, though, still, even if you didn't enter those shows, you can enter Grand Rapids, or if you've entered those other shows and your quilt hasn't hit its birthday, you can for sure add these shows to your list. So Grand Rapids closes on April 30th and Columbus closes on May 21st. So if you have quilts in progress, get them finished.
Yes.
Use these holidays and these cold months to get those quilts finished, because we'd love to see your quilt here at our show. This just goes over really winners and when quilts are due. So if your quilt was accepted at Daytona Beach, remember you got to get that quilt to us by January 16th.
But don't ship it until after January 2nd,
Yes.
unless it was coming through from international, because we understand those take longer. But the the shipping dates for Daytona Beach is, ship it after the holidays. We don't want your quilts in the middle of that holiday traffic if we can avoid that. So, January 2nd to January 16th. Also keep in mind, if your quilt is hanging in, it has been accepted at the New England show and it's going to be hanging in Hartford, those quilts will be shipped after the Paducah show. Because if you notice
Back
those
to you.
dates, yes, if you notice those dates, there's only a week in between those shows. So we're going to be coming back from Connecticut and then prepping for the Paducah show. So it will be shipped after the Paducah show. It will be shipped back to you. Now, if you have something coming up and you need your quilt to be shipped before those Paducah dates, you need it back directly after that Hartford date. Just send me an email, let me know, and I'll make arrangements for that. Otherwise, any quilts that are being shipped home after the New England show, they will be shipped after the Paducah show.
Unless you were lucky enough that your quilt is in New England and Paducah,
Yes.
which you
yes.
might find out in early January.
Yes.
Just saying. All right. So we will take one final question, and we do have to jump. And it's been a fabulous hour and a half. I can't believe we had so many questions. We went this long. But when specific measurements are required for entry, does that mean the widest part, including the binding? Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep. Your finished quilt, what is the size?
Yes.
So I think
Outermost edge to outermost edge.
so. It's been a fabulous
Yes.
webinar. We're so glad that so many of you decided to join us today. But we thoroughly enjoyed you joining us for this time, and everyone have a happy holiday and a safe one there too.
Yes.
So, and we hope to see you at one of our 2026 quilt shows.